to the third player education video. Today we're going to focus on the Camarilla's greatest rival, the Sabbat. The Sabbat came into being roughly the same time as the Camarilla, a divergent result of the Anarch Rebellion. I want this video to focus a lot on the internal political structure of the Sabbat, so I'm not going to go over the same history that led up to the founding of the Camarilla. If you want a refresher, you can click the link below, which will take you to that video. To start with, I'd like to spend a little time going over the themes and design philosophy of the Sabbat. Originally, the Sabbat were created as antagonists for the main Camarilla game, the bizarre and inhuman villains who represented everything that the Camarilla struggled against when it came to vampirism. However, player response was such that White Wolf eventually came out with several Sabbat supplements, allowing players to delve into these darker aspects of their psyche. The Sabbat is an unliving contradiction. Every Sabbat is a hypocrite. The Sabbat values freedom, but vampires can be executed for heresy, or for defying the orders of their superiors. The sect rejects the blood bond and ties of lineage as slavery, but willingly enters into a much more demanding form of spiritual bondage with the Vaulderie and the Vinculum. Sabbat often spend more time policing their fellows for signs of heresy than they do focusing on outward enemies. The Sabbat is also about extremism. The Sabbat doesn't do anything by half measures. Everything the Sabbat does, they do dialed up to 11. Those who are not Sabbat are to be despised and feared. The Sabbat rejects the humane, and willingly pursues paths of enlightenment as a way to grow closer to their own vampiric nature. To a Sabbat, clinging to humanity is doomed to failure. The beast is real, and denying it won't help you control it. To fully be master of your own destiny, you must be willing to grow past the boundaries of humanity and adopt a path in order to control your beast. By playing a Sabbat character, you must be willing to entertain extremist, dissonant beliefs, and play a character with a dramatically different viewpoint on right and wrong. So, all that being said, we now open in 1493. The Convention of Thorns has effectively created the Camarilla, much to the delight of certain elders. The Anarchs grudgingly accept the results, but another faction, led by La Sombra and Chimisay elders, was much more unhappy with the outcome. To understand why, we need to focus a little bit on the Book of Nod. The Book of Nod is not a single tome. It's a collection of writings, mostly prophetical, attributed to Cain or another ancient. In the Dark Ages, the Book of Nod was as common among vampires as the Bible was among mortals, though in a garbled, fragmented, and poorly translated state. The focus of the Book of Nod is a collection of prophecies revolving around the end times called Gehenna. These apocalyptic prophecies created a profound paranoia and dread among those who believed, this frantic belief being the direct fuel which motivated the founders of the Sabbat. So, while the Toreador and Ventrue celebrated the dawning of a new age of vampire kind, the nascent Sabbat left the Convention of Thorns in disgust and headed for the nearby mortal village of Silchester, England. Cue the screaming and crying and massive masquerade breaches as the vampires went berserk. Some members of the other clans threw off the shackles of their elders and joined in, becoming the first anti-tribu. Of course, no sooner did the Sabbat form than the infighting began, mostly by the two dominant clans, La Sombra and Chimisay. The fighting was, of course, over who got to be in charge. This conflict gave rise to the two oldest factions in the Sabbat, the ultra-Orthodox and the Loyalists, whose beliefs we'll detail a bit later. The fighting came to an end with the Synod of Orphans in the 1600s, which formed a distinction between the Auctoritas, or official rite, and the Ignobilis, or unofficial but still acceptable rite. The Code of Milan was developed around this time as well, though it would take some time to be fully accepted as the core of Sabbat law. Unfortunately, the infighting in the 1600s meant that the Camarilla had gotten a significant head start when it came to settling the New World. Following the Spanish, the La Sombra managed to carve out territory in Mexico and South America, but the United States and Canada would remain largely Camarilla held. The Sabbat and Camarilla would fight skirmishes and crusades against each other over the next few centuries. Though the Sabbat was more proactive in their tactics, they lacked the internal discipline and organization of the Camarilla. Many a solid plan to take a Camarilla city fell apart due to infighting and rivalry. This became blindingly apparent in the 19th century when Infernalists were revealed to have significantly infiltrated the Sabbat. In response, the Inquisition formed, another branch of the Sabbat charged with finding and rooting out the infernal. They were granted wide latitude in pursuit of this aim, for while the value of freedom often leads Sabbat down an infernal road, as a whole, the Sabbat must categorically reject enslavement to a demon as emphatically as they reject enslavement to an antediluvian. They often clash with the Black Hand, culminating in a Black Hand purge of the Inquisition in the 20th century. The 19th century as well proved to be transformative for the Sabbat. In an attempt to provide more solid structure for the Sabbat, the Purchase Pact was introduced in 1804. Quibbling over details, the arguments were hot enough to provoke the Second Sabbat Civil War, which raged merrily up through the 19th century, while the Camarilla continued to gain territorial ground elsewhere. The fighting finally stopped in 1913 with the formal acceptance of the Code of Milan as the law by which all Sabbat would abide. Of note during this time was Joseph Pander, a caitiff, who managed to draw other clanlists to him. While the Camarilla rejects and despises caitiff, the Sabbat takes a much more welcoming attitude. After all, the Sabbat values what a vampire can do more than their age, lineage, or clan. Furthermore, caitiff have no antediluvian. They're just a little freer from the jihad than other vampires. As a result of Joseph Pander's efforts, Sabbat call their caitiff Pander in his honor. So, the Sabbat finally manages to get everything together and are ready to start attacking Camarilla cities when the Week of Nightmares happens in 1999. The Sabbat were as giddy as a group of preppers watching the missiles launch. At last, they were vindicated. The end times were at hand, the antediluvians were about to rise, and it's time to get Gehenna started. Their religious fervor finally pointing the Sabbat all in roughly the same direction, assaults against Camarilla territories like Atlanta and Washington, D.C. were launched. However, the Sabbat victories were short-lived. Melinda Galbraith, long the regent of Sabbat, was assassinated. And then, when Shulgi awoke and called his clan back to Alamut, a disturbing number of Assamite anti-tribute answered the call, including the vast majority of the Black Hand. Those Assamites who do remain are often regarded with suspicion, as their packmates and fellow Sabbat wonder just how long until this particular child of Hakim turns her coat and returns to the mountain as well. Further crippling the Sabbat was the Curse of the Betrayer, a blood curse which wiped out every Tremere of Goratrix's line, which was the vast majority of the Tremere anti-tribu. Only a small branch of Lithuanian pagan blood magicians survived, and they are extremely rare in modern nights. And then, nothing. Ravnos was the only antediluvian to wake up, and he wasn't even taken out by Sabbat. The sect fell back to infighting, each faction blaming the other's lack of faith for the crisis. Unfortunately, this infighting was less than discreet, and the Sabbat drew the attention of mortal hunters, who further crippled the sect. They might have fallen apart then and there, except for the emergence and strong leadership of Timok the Jackal, a gangrel coyote, who emerged quickly as the new regent. Rather than fight the Camarilla head-on, which Timok realized would be a losing battle, he turned the Sabbat against the smaller and weaker independent clans, the Sedites, the Giovanni, and the independent Assamites. He also caused a tactical shift in how the Sabbat fought. Previously, the Sabbat would mass embrace shovelheads, creating dozens of vampires who would survive just long enough to ruin the Camarilla's night in shock and awe tactics. Under Timok's leadership, shovelheading fell out of favor. Now the Sabbat preferred more thoughtful embraces, and to use surgical strikes and guerrilla warfare. Thus is the Sabbat in modern nights. Greatly damaged by the last few decades, the survivors have contracted, and become even more fervent in their devotion to Cain. Paranoia runs rampant, as those who remain fear their own lack of devotion is to blame for the current predicament. Now, let's delve a little deeper into Sabbat belief and factions. The Sabbat is a militant religion, divided between the value of freedom and the need for structure and discipline. The regent is the leader of the Sabbat, and despite the various powers laid out in the Code of Milan and Sabbat tradition, Timok wields power through force of personality, and has just as much authority as the other Cainites agree he has. The backbone of the Sabbat is the clergy, the cardinals, archbishops, and bishops, who see to it that the regent's will is carried out in their local diocese. At the local level are the bishops, some of whom oversee a specific territory, others who oversee a purview within the larger diocese. While bishops are appointed and affirmed by the archbishop, they require the support of several pacts to be legitimate. Archbishops always have a territorial jurisdiction, and can have up to 5 bishops serving beneath them. They are responsible for the security of their diocese, as well as the overall spiritual welfare of the Sabbat living within their borders. They may summon, but they may not give orders to, members of the Inquisition and Black Hand to their diocese if they feel a need for their support. Overseeing the archbishops are the cardinals, incredibly powerful and vicious clergy whose domains are often as large as countries. Like bishops, the archbishops are raised or removed by their supervising cardinals. The cardinals answer only to the regent. Side by side are the Templars and Paladins, martial servants of the bishopric. Templars answer to the clergy who appointed them, and can defy any order from a lower-ranking Cainite. Paladins in particular serve the Inquisition, while Templars serve the clergy. In addition to the clergy is the martial arm of the Sabbat. At the top is the Prisci Council. The Prisci Council works with the regent as advisors and direct agents. When a new regent is raised, his ordination is a bloodbath collectively performed by the Prisci Council. Prisci hold no territory as part of their office, but nevertheless wield incredible power. They can, if they wish, overturn a ruling by the regent via unanimous vote, but that's a move with no small amount of risk involved. Other militant orders of the Sabbat. The Black Hand. The Black Hand are the best of the best, Navy SEALs in a room full of Marine grunts. For many years, the Black Hand was almost entirely comprised of Assamite anti-tribu. However, with the calling back to Alamut of the clan, and the discovery that much of the Black Hand had been infiltrated by an ancient death cult, the order in modern nights has lost much. However, Timok stepped in and prevented the order's complete dissolution by forcing the Black Hand to accept Nosferatu and Gangrel members, including some of Timok's own childer. Though the Black Hand retains its status as an elite organization, the Assamites now find themselves in the minority. While almost any Cainite who demonstrates sufficient skill can be considered for membership, initiates of the Black Hand may never again hold a sect position, not even within their own pack, and service is for life. The only way to leave the Black Hand is, so to speak, in a body bag. Another functionally independent group is the Inquisition, formed in 1804 to confront the growing threat of infernalism within the Sabbat. Most inquisitors are in packs with other inquisitors, and as their duties frequently require them to travel from diocese to diocese, are often nomadic. They have a reputation for cruelty, often willing to purge whole packs due to the merest suspicion of infernal taint. The Inquisition can accuse any Cainite save the regent of heresy. Trials are quick, brutal, and decisive. The punishment for guilt in all cases is torture and death. Of course, the core institution of the Sabbat is the pack. Between 3 and 7 Cainites, all packs must have a ductus and a priest. Between the two of them, they share leadership of the pack, in a reflection of the Sabbat being supported by the Sword of Caine and the Church of Caine. Ducti are responsible for tactical and political leadership, while the priests tend to the spiritual needs of their packmates and ensure the rite are observed, in particular the Vauldery. In more warlike packs, the ductus is often the final decision-maker, while spiritually inclined packs often have their priest serve the leadership role. Packs can be nomadic or founded, and some packs switch between the two as needed, though clergy members must always be part of a founded pack. Some pack, especially the covens, employ an abbot, a Cainite tasked with maintaining the shared communal haven. Absolutely no one, not even the regent, has the authority to interfere in the internal structure of a pack. A pack, and a pack alone, decides who among them will be ductus, priest, or abbot. Losing one's pack, especially for old packs with long-established vinculum, is often very traumatizing. Many Cainites don't survive the loss. The core rite of every pack is the Vaulderie. Some packs are quite ardent with this rite, others are more lax. The Vaulderie, a ritual sharing of blood, is what binds the Sabbat to each other. The Sabbat believes the Vaulderie keeps them safe from the machinations of the antediluvians. Every Vaulderie creates or enforces the vinculum, a mystic bond both like and unlike the blood bond. As a result, packs, especially packs which have been together for decades, are often loyal and devoted to each other to the point of codependence. Like any church, the Sabbat contains within it various factions, each with their own take on the doctrine of Caine. The ultra-conservatives value structure and hierarchy, and believe that obedience to the clergy is necessary for the survival and growth of the sect. Ultra-Orthodox are quite martial, and believe the Vaulderie should be shared widely. The sect will function best if every member has a vinculum, even a mild one, to every other member. The Orthodox remain focused on the rite and the doctrine and the religious angle of the Sabbat. In Orthodox pacts, the priest is likely in charge. The Orthodox also have a mystic bent, favoring the study of blood magic. The Loyalists are one of the largest factions, at least half the sect. The Loyalists prize freedom above all else and reject the Church of Caine. Loyalists are pack first, and their ideal Sabbat is one without any hierarchy at all, where packs are loyal directly to the regent. They will not listen to clergy unless they must, but they will listen to a prisci if said prisci has individually earned their respect. The Order of St. Blaise is unique within the Sabbat. While the Sabbat normally looks down on humane vampires and eschews frequent contact with mortals beyond what's necessary to hunt, the Order realizes that sometimes it's good to have mortal friends. They work with humans, wielding influence and retainers for the good and support of the sect. Though many Cainites look down on them, they cannot deny that the Order of St. Blaise provides needed and valuable service. The moderates and status quo are much smaller factions, generally comprised of Cainites who see little reason to change things, whether that's due to political apathy or just because they think things are fine the way they are. Lastly, a little bit on how to play Sabbat. A Sabbat vampire revels in its own vampiric nature. Humanity is to be pitied or scorned, especially those deluded vampires who still attempt to ape it. Cainites want to explore their own vampiric nature and frequently adopt paths of enlightenment. Cainites who often share a path, particularly paths such as Night or Cathari, often gather and perform rite in keeping with the values of their path. Many cathedrals often have small sections away from the main room, dark chapels where Cainites can celebrate their path. On its face, the Sabbat rejects nepotism. You are what you have personally accomplished. No one cares what your sire has done. Sabbat also tend to embrace more frequently, and given the Vaulderie, sire-child relationships often take a back seat to pack relationships, or even mentor-protege relationships. The Sabbat is a young sect, the vast majority being younger than 50. Many of the established leaders, especially the prisci, are much older, but this creates a unique sort of tension. While the elders are nominally the leaders, they are the leaders of a sect which inherently mistrusts them as potential pawns in the jihad. The Sabbat also fully embraces practices which other vampires are horrified to contemplate. Torture is a perfectly acceptable way to get information, and diablerie is how you strengthen the sect. It's possible to overdo it, especially given the risks inherent in the soul shard, but by and large the Sabbat encourages and promotes diablerie. However, the Sabbat also believes strongly in honor, though a very vampiric sort of honor. They don't deal in boons, but if you give your word to help a sektmate, you had better come through on that. The Sabbat has emerged through a cascade of crises in the Nights of Turmoil. Many of these crises, such as the infiltration of the Black Hand, were the result of the Sabbat not being vigilant enough. More than a few Sabbat also extend this to not being faithful enough. As a result, and encouraged by Timok, the Sabbat in modern nights is refocusing on spirituality and faithfulness. Of course, for the Sabbat, that means less time in prayer and quiet contemplation, and more in renewed vigor to the principles of Caine and the prophecies in the Book of Nod. Gehenna is coming. The Sabbat is half apocalypse cult and half martial training camp for that very apocalypse. Those outside the cult are viewed with suspicion and paranoia. Extended contact with other supernatural creatures, especially other vampires, is explicitly discouraged. That being said, the Sabbat does accept converts, but those converts should be prepared to prove their sincerity to the cause of Cain. Lastly, the Sabbat in North America is quite active in fighting the Camarilla, while their counterparts in Eastern Europe and South America often take a live and let live approach, content to watch the Camarilla tear itself apart from the inside, while focusing on preparing spiritually and martially for Gehenna. And that's our video on the Sabbat. I hope you found it informative and helpful, and I'll see you at the next video.